For the longest time, whenever I heard the term action or hack and slash combat, my mind always jumped to the Devil May Cry series, even though I have had very limited experience with the franchise. In an industry that boasts many legendary IPs, it's an impressive feat for DMC to be talked about in such high regard, even after all these years. Devil May Cry 5 was my first DMC game, and it left an amazing first impression. This game just oozes quality. From the tight, action-packed combat the series is known for, to the breathtaking character art and cinematography shown through the gorgeous cutscenes, all amplified by a fantastic soundtrack that fits the game's aesthetic perfectly and is bound to get your heart pumping in certain moments. Capcom certainly impresses me with this one, and I would like to use this time to share my thoughts on my experience going through a Devil May Cry game for the first time. I will do my best to keep the first parts of this video as spoiler-free as possible. However, in the later parts, I'll be diving deep into the story and be discussing spoilers, including the ending. If you haven't played the game before and don't want the story ruined, there will be a much firmer warning before we really get into it, so stick around until then. I mentioned earlier that DMC 5 is my first Devil May Cry game, and this is mostly true. The truth is, there was a time in my life where DMC was being played in the house I lived in. I have vague memories of trying it out, but I don't even remember which DMC game it was. A buddy of mine was pretty into it, so I watched occasionally, but never got pulled into it. I think it's possible this was due to some sort of inherent resistance to action, hack-and-slash type games, although I'm not entirely sure. After thinking on it, I remember a lot of competitive multiplayer games, a lot of RPGs, a smattering of sports games, and a ton of Guitar Hero. Not a lot of action games in there. So sadly, DMC was left out of my gaming rotations, and honestly, I think I may have missed out. As I have gotten older and have really noticed myself opening up to many different genres and game types that I normally would avoid, I've not regretted this at all. DMC 5 is a prime example of this. I very much enjoyed my time with this game, and I'm glad I came back to it and played it all the way through. Or did I? From what I can gather, it doesn't seem like playing through the story is really the main point of the game. Even though the story is perfectly fine, the game really wants you to tackle it on its harder difficulties. DMC 5 has a total of 6 different difficulties, and in my limited experience with them, Human is a cakewalk, Devil Hunter seems pretty well balanced, and Son of Sparta started as pretty challenging and pretty soon started kicking my ass. I have no experience with the higher difficulties, and honestly, I don't plan on playing them. This is not a knock on them in the slightest, and in fact, I think these are amazing additions to the game. To explain myself briefly, let's talk about the difficulties a bit more. The Human difficulty basically plays like an easy mode for the most part. The enemies really don't do a lot of damage, and the game throws a relatively small amount of enemies at you as well, so you never really feel the need to perform particularly well. You could pretty much button mash your way through the entire game, and as long as you know how to dodge some attacks, you should be fine. I don't think I'm very good at this game, and I made it through Human only dying once, and that death came near the end of the game against the final boss. Then I used a golden orb and beat him. We can talk about those orbs later. Once I beat the game for the first time, I unlocked Son of Sparta mode. I also unlocked some other modes too, so I wasn't really sure that Son of Sparta was the third difficulty. I jumped right into this mode and immediately understood that I still had a lot to learn. I got through the first few missions and then I hit a difficulty wall and decided this was a good place to stop. Now, the fact that I even tried the other difficulty is a pretty good sign for DMC, as usually by the end I'm happy to put whatever game I just finished away for a long time, but I was compelled to give it a try. DMC has a reputation for not only excellent combat, but also excellent encounter designs, and I wanted to see if that reputation held up. Even though I didn't experience all of it, I can safely say that it holds up very well, at least to this newcomer. We will talk more in depth about combat later, but for now all I want to say is that in order to push past this difficulty spike, it would have forced me to practice for quite a while and get good, as they say. I'm totally fine with this, and I actually think this is an excellent sign for those who really love this game and want to get as much out of it as they can. You can eventually unlock more difficulties that include one-hit kill settings for both you and the demons. Bosses get new attack animations, and encounters are revamped to be much more difficult. I have to imagine that getting through encounters on these difficulties will have you feeling like an ultimate badass, as you have to be absolutely on point to make it through. For me, as my goal is to complete many different games and write essays on all of them, I made the executive decision to save the time I would have needed to invest to get that good and start writing this essay. We should probably talk about a topic that some people will be wondering about if they haven't played a DMC game before, and that is, do you need to have played the previous games in the series to know what's going on? Well, the answer I think is a pretty simple no you don't. I think there's also some nuance to this. I went in totally fresh, knowing next to nothing about anything in the entire series, and I liked it quite a bit. This is why I say no, you don't have to know anything about the previous games, and you can still have a great time. However, I wonder what series veterans felt about this, as I believe there are many references and nods to previous games. Characters are introduced in previous games, so if you've played those, you would realize this and feel much more grounded. Nero, for example, is one of the main characters, and he was introduced in DMC 4. I had no idea about that. I thought he was introduced in DMC 5 along with V, but I later learned that I have a lot to learn. So no, you don't need to know anything about the series to get into DMC 5. There's an HD collection available on Steam that includes 1, 2, and 3, and 4 is also available separately, so if you want to experience them all, you can, but they're not required in my opinion. As you've very likely been able to tell by this point, the overall presentation is a major strength of DMC 5, arguably rivaling the actual combat system as this game's #1 selling point. I feel that Capcom have really outdone themselves here, but then again, they have shown expertise in this area with games such as Resident Evil 7 and the Resident Evil 2 remake as well coming to mind. The difference with DMC, in my opinion, is that the setting allows the devs to unleash some really awesome music that we wouldn't get to hear in a survival horror game like Resident Evil. Also, the main characters, Dante, Nero, and V, are each shown to be major badasses in both cutscenes and actual gameplay. The graphics in DMC 5 are flat out amazing, and we have to remember this game came out in 2019, which, while not that long ago, I would say it holds its own even against the beastie games of 2020. The character art in particular really stood out to me as absolutely fantastic, and while other games certainly do a good job in this department, I can't think of any game that actually outshines these characters' digital portrayal. Facial expressions are top tier and do a great job conveying the emotions our characters are feeling throughout the whole game. The environments look great as well, and even though I have some issues with the actual level design, I couldn't find much to complain about in the actual graphical department. One thing you could say is that a lot of the areas can look very similar. For the most part, with maybe a couple of rare instances, the game takes place either in the city streets, inside specific buildings, or underground, delving deeper into this demon-type world. While the environments get more and more demon-y as you get further into the game, it feels pretty similar to what you've been seeing as you move forward, and you might find yourself wishing for a change of scenery. Of course, it all fits with the story provided in the game, but it would be nice to explore some foresty areas with lush green environments, or maybe some other ideas. As for the interface, it has a very clean look, resembling a lot of other character action games of a similar type. While you're exploring outside of combat, the HUD disappears to give you a very good view of your surroundings, only popping up in certain relevant areas. Like when you pick up some red orbs, the red orb counter appears in the top right briefly, so you can see where you're at, but then fades away pretty quickly. It's slick, and I have no complaints here. In combat, things are just as great as your health and different gauges appear in the top left. If you're using ammo, it's in the bottom right, and your combat score is constantly updating in the right side of the screen. Everything stays out of the middle of the screen, which is great as there's typically tons of action going on there, and it's nice to have a clear view. The menus are also beautifully crafted with simple to understand interface and interesting backgrounds depending on where you are in the story. It's nothing earth-shattering, but I had zero issues with the menus, so it's at least worth noting. Believe it or not all games can achieve success with their menus. Moving on to sound design, let's talk about the voice acting. It's good. I found myself favoring Nero's voice over all of them, but each character does a great job for the most part. I found V's voice to be a little bit grating on my ears sometimes, but it feels like that's supposed to be the point. We will talk more about the actual characters later, but as far as I'm convinced, A+ on the voice acting through and through. The music is where things really start to shine. Devil Trigger is such an awesome song that I can listen to it multiple times consecutively, which is good considering it's the battle song that plays when you're controlling Nero, so you're going to be hearing it quite often. DMC5's music does an interesting thing during combat where it scales based on your current score. There's actually a great video on YouTube that basically taught me everything I know about this system, so you should check it out. I'll leave a link in the description below. Basically, the music starts off calm, and while your score is between D and B, you hear the main verses repeating in the background. Once you hit the A rank, The music transitions into a sort of hype drum roll that is building up to when you finally hit S. Once you achieve S rank, the main chorus for Devil Trigger kicks in, and if you're good enough at the game to trigger this on a regular basis, I envy you because the chorus just enhances the battle so well that there's no way it won't get your heart pumping. Of course, there are similar effects with V's Crimson Cloud and Dante's Subhuman. While I'm sure Devil May Cry 5 is not the only game to implement this dynamic music idea for battles, I would love to see this trend and become a more regular thing, as I really appreciated the way it amplified the thrill of battle and encourages you to play well in order to trigger the best parts of the music. Overall, the music does a fantastic job helping immerse you into the world of DMC and get you in touch with your inner emo demon slayer. So, now that we're moving into actual gameplay discussion, let's talk about the main reason you will be enjoying this game, the combat. Now, I should probably remind you guys that action games are not usually in my gaming rotation. I'll just come out and say that I never got a full grasp of the combat system myself, but I don't think that this is the game's fault for the most part. I suppose you could say the human difficulty doesn't do much to push you to get better, so there's a real chance for some bad habits to set in and be difficult to work out later on. Each character has their own interesting combat system that fits pretty well with their personality, and since they're each fairly different from each other, let's talk about them separately. I'll start with Nero, who is my favorite of the three. Armed with a one-handed sword named the Red Queen, a magnum named Blue Rose, and an assortment of robotic hand devices called Devil Breakers, Nero uses these tools in harmony as he dishes out the pain. With a well-balanced mix of range and melee options, you'll find yourself seamlessly switching between them as the situation evolves around you. And the Devil Breaker's grapple hook allows for some flashy combos as you knock enemies away, only to pull them back in immediately to continue hammering on them. You can launch enemies up into the air and either jump up with them for some air juggling, or juggle them from the ground with gunfire. It looks and feels fantastic, especially once you start actually stringing a couple S-rated battles together and can rock out to the awesome battle music. Nero can also use his various Devil Breakers in different ways, but this particular system was tough for me to grasp for some reason. I was never able to remember which Devil Breakers did what, and typically just use them to extend my combo a bit and try to raise the score. I've seen clips of people using Devil Breakers to amazing effects, and I believe this was a key mechanic that I kind of missed out on. And finally, there is the Exceed mechanic, which I also had a hard time grasping. I believe the way this works is that you're supposed to rev up your sword by repeatedly pulling the left trigger, and I think it has more impact if you do it while striking an enemy, but I never fully figured it out. When your Exceed gauge fills out, you do more damage and get access to more powerful attack animations which look really cool and extend your combos more. I experimented with it more towards the end of the game, but I found it to just feel kind of awkward and button mashy. I would go in for melee combos and just pull the left trigger constantly, hoping to proc it, and sometimes it would and other times it wouldn't. I take responsibility for this as well, as I'm sure with dedicated practice I could have started to get the hang of it, but I also suppose the game could have explained it a little better. Next up is Dante, since he is pretty similar to Nero in that he has a good mix of range and melee options, but with many more weapon types and attack animations to play with. If Nero is all about mastering one particular combat system, Dante is more about learning multiple different stance and weapon combinations and using as many of them as possible to deal out damage, keep yourself safe, and look like a badass while doing so. Once again though, my personal experience may have been held back by the human difficulty, as it doesn't really push you to use different options, and technically, you could beat Dante's missions with just one specific playstyle and not be punished for it. I unfortunately fell into this trap for the majority of the game, focusing on staying in Trickster stance for mobility and just using the sword and dual pistol combo, very similar to Nero. For this reason, I'm really not the right person to be breaking down the different options available to Dante because I just didn't use them very much, and I would just be spouting information from online articles. What I will say is that he has 4 different stances. Trickster is for extra mobility, Swordmaster for extra melee combat abilities, Gunslinger is for extra ranged options, and Royal Guard, which is a defensive option meant to parry and counter enemy attacks that I never got to work, although I barely tried it out myself. His weapon options include dual pistols, a shotgun, a hat called Dr. Faust that gives Michael Jackson vibes, and according to the internet, seems pretty overpowered, a rocket launcher, a couple sword options, a fist weapon, some cool nunchucks, and a motorcycle. So instead of me trying to pretend like I know all the best ways to use all of these weapons, I'll just leave it to your imagination. Each of these weapons and stances offer different attack animations and combos that can be all tied together in a beautiful orchestra of combat. Or you can just use your sword. Dante also has a Devil Trigger mode that turns him into a demon for a short period of time, enhancing his damage and attack abilities in even more ways. There really is too much to go into here for me, but you have to imagine the amount of options that are available to dig into and master, and when playing on the harder difficulties, this will be required but fulfilling once learned. I would say Dante has the highest skill ceiling, but could probably be the most fun to play for players able to reach his max potential. And finally, we have V, who is pretty obviously the black sheep of the bunch in many ways. I found V's combat to be the least fun of the three to actually play, but there is no doubt that it's interesting and suits his character. V uses his three main familiars in battle: Griffin, Shadow, and Nightmare. Griffin and Shadow are V's main allies, and they help him build up Devil Trigger if you control them manually, which can be used to summon Nightmare. Griffin is a flying familiar that has electric range attacks, but can also swoop in and get involved in some melee. Shadow is a panther that seems inspired by Guinevere from the Drizzt series. He has some pretty awesome melee attacks and can get on top of enemies and shred them up. Nightmare is a nightmare for your enemies. He is a large golem-type monster and knows how to arrive in style. He kinda just goes ham on the enemies while you maneuver around and find ways to help him out. He doesn't last very long, but he will turn the tide of many battles for you. I found the manual controls for Griffin and Shadow to be a little clunky and hard to get used to. They would frequently do attacks that didn't suit the situation, probably because I was also trying to move V around and keep him out of danger, so my inputs would end up confirming the wrong attacks. Again, this is a me issue, and I did not realize for an embarrassingly long time that you could actually consume Devil Trigger to allow the familiars to auto-attack enemies in a more intelligent way. Another thing worth noting is that the familiars cannot actually kill demons, so V is required to dart around the map, executing weak enemies, and when done right, it actually feels very fun and flashy. Occasionally though, the enemies will be just barely spread out enough to be too far to chain the kills together, and it's a bit of a buzzkill watching V swing and miss a couple times before having to trot a little bit closer and then confirm the kill. As far as the summoner style combat goes, I think DMC did a pretty good job, but in comparison to Nero and Dante, it falls just a bit short in my opinion. The character progression is fairly basic in general. You collect red orbs in a very Souls-like fashion as you defeat demons and find stashes around the world. You then use these orbs to purchase new upgrades for each of your weapons or familiars. There are also abilities like air dodging and sprinting that you have to unlock this way as well. It's nice in a sense that you get to decide your progression path for each character. You will probably be leaning on a specific playstyle for each character that works best for you, at least early on. So this level up system allows you to branch out in any direction you want, which I think is a pretty good idea. After a while though, I found it to be less engaging the further into the game I got. I just started dumping orbs into whatever in order to complete upgrade trees. It's worth noting that after my first playthrough, I wasn't even close to 100%ing any of the character upgrades, so if you're more into the system than I was, there's plenty more reasons to keep playing after beating the game the first time. Overall, I would say the character progression system is pretty good, but nothing earth-shattering. It's also worth talking about the enemy and boss design, as I feel like these are pretty strong in DMC 5 overall. Again, my experience may not be complete since I played mostly on human difficulty, but I liked the variety of enemy types, each with their own gimmicks and combat styles that have you adapting to their moveset and defenses. As you progress, the game throws different varieties of encounters at you to keep you on your toes, and I can only imagine that it gets better as the difficulties get higher. I found the bosses to be pretty fun as well, but not very memorable overall. There are some exceptions here as well though, including one of the first bosses, which is a giant colossus that has some pretty cool set pieces. The final bosses in the game are actually pretty awesome as well, but we'll save them for later. Now, we can finally jump into one of my biggest gripes with DMC 5, and that is the level design. I remember very specifically jumping into this game almost directly after finishing Code Vein, and being very unimpressed with the level design. It actually pushed me away from the game for a while. The level design overall for DMC 5 is very basic and linear almost the whole way through. The levels are basically a series of rooms connected by hallways, and the rooms typically have battles in them. Sure, sometimes you have to look around a corner to find an item that you need to progress, but it's very basic and video gamey. The thing I had to realize was that this is not a game built off exploring well-designed levels. It's a game built off a fantastic combat system, and the levels are designed to get you from fight to fight and keep the fun pumping. It was my mistake to expect the game to have specific features that I enjoy when those features didn't fit the vision that the devs had for the game. Once I got over this, I had a much easier time getting over the basic level design and allowed it to do its thing without complaint. That said, there may be some of you out there that will have a harder time getting over this aspect. Another thing that I mentioned earlier is the visuals and environments can be a bit more boring than I expected. They look nice, but by the end of the game you might be wishing for some serious change of scenery. There are lots of city streets, building hallways, and demon worlds to get through, with a small number of exceptions. It's clear this was one aspect of the game that the devs paid less attention to, but I don't believe it hurts the experience enough to stop people enjoying this game's well-polished combat system and cutscenes. Speaking of cutscenes, this is a section where we will bring in a firm spoiler warning. From this point forward, I will start discussing the story from start to finish. I'll be showing scenes from much further into the game, including the ending. If you haven't played the game and don't want the story spoiled, then now is the time to get out of here. Go enjoy the game, and then come back and check out the rest of the video. As for the rest of you, let's get started. The game starts off with a cutscene featuring a large demonic tree-looking thing that I think is called a Clyphoth. An NPC named Morrison seems concerned that Dante will not make it out of this one. Now, even right from the start, I feel that DMC veterans are going to know a lot more about the NPCs and histories between Nero, Dante, and everyone else. I didn't know Morrison at all, but it's possible he was an important character in the previous games. If I miss any sort of obvious references to previous games, I apologize, but as you know, it's my first DMC game. I think certain things that happen much later in the game may be a lot more predictable to DMC fans, but for me, they were more unexpected. Moving on. The game then cuts to Dante already in combat with a boss-looking demon. Nero and V are approaching as well and decide to help Dante out. Nero has some animosity towards the demon as well, which we'll learn more about soon. We notice early on that Nero is missing an arm, which I suppose is notable. After slashing up some baddies, we make it to the boss chamber where we find Dante and his girlfriends getting their ass kicked. Nero thinks he's up to the task, but this is an unwinnable boss battle. I'm at the point now where I feel like unwinnable boss battles are a bit cliche, but when done right and not excessively, I can live with it. This is not the only unwinnable boss battle in the game, so I would say DMC 5 is a bit excessive in this regard. But for now, it helps to tell the story, so whatever. Once we lose, Dante wakes up and pulls his devil trigger, I guess. He turns into a demon and uses his final strength to buy Nero and V just enough time to escape. He calls Nero deadweight in the process, which stings something awful, and plants a seed in Nero, which manifests in an intense determination that I really liked in this character. Nero doesn't take it well, of course, but V convinces him that it's better to stay alive for now and get revenge later. He makes it clear that he thinks Nero is the only one who can eventually defeat Urizen, the Demon King who just kicked their asses. We also learn that Urizen is the one who took Nero's arm, more motivation to get back at him. As Nero and V escape, Dante is defeated again and we get a fantastic look at his face. Just fantastic. After this, the city starts getting torn apart, so V and Nero leave to regroup. V seems to take off on his own, and Nero joins Nico, who is a pretty awesome side character / mechanic who is responsible for your upgrades and transportation. They talk about some backstory between them, and this is where the cinematography and voice acting work so well together to establish the characters. I liked Nero a lot my entire time playing the game, and I think these cutscenes were largely the reason. We see him as a brooding hero type. He hates Nico smoking in the van, but cares about her enough to light a smoke for her when she needs one. It's hard not to like him, and it's impossible not to like Nico. She has a passion for engineering and driving like a maniac in what has to be the most indestructible van in the universe. She also has a killer instinct and is not afraid of no demons. We get this excellent intro cutscene, and that sets the tone, and with Devil Trigger going on in the background, you will be amped to get started killing demons. I'm going to try not to talk about every single cool cutscene because there are a lot of them. It's safe to assume that every main character and NPC in this game has their own badass moments, and Capcom proves this throughout the entire game. After getting through the first mission, we get another cutscene explaining the reason for Nero's missing arm. Once again, it establishes a sense of camaraderie between Nico and Nero, as they seem to work well together and have for quite a while. Nero mentions another woman named Kyrie quite often, and it becomes clear that she is his love interest. Since there's no romance with Nico, she is just a great friend and teammate. A strange figure catches Nero alone and just takes his arm. The figure says he's taking it back, and then it turns into a katana, which allows the creation of a travel gate of some sort, because reasons. This may be presumptuous, but I think the katana is supposed to trigger something in DMC fans' heads, as I believe that it is the main weapon of an important character from previous games, but it was all new to me. So since V said Urizen stole our arm, and now we have this memory, I suppose that figure was Urizen. Next up, we explore a ruined city in search of V. About halfway through this mission, we spot him battling demons up ahead. Now I should bring up this interesting multiplayer system that DMC5 has going on here. There are certain missions in the story that involve Nero, V, and Dante, and sometimes you're given the choice over who you want to play as. You will then see the other characters off in the distance fighting their own battles, and these are sometimes controlled by other humans. It's pretty nifty actually, and there's even one mission where the three come together at the end and fight the boss, which I thought was pretty awesome. Anyways, tangent aside, we continue chasing V down, solving mundane video game puzzles and slaying demons along the way. Eventually, we find a phone booth, which will set me off on another tangent quickly. At certain points in the missions, usually before a boss fight, you can contact Nico and have her drive to you to allow you to upgrade and customize before the fight. These are just more excuses to show off Nico's maniacal driving and to show how tough that van really is. They are usually pretty funny and entertaining, but I won't talk about every single one of them. While this next boss is not the first one technically, it feels like it is, and I think it is a very strong highlight for the game and was a very fun boss fight. The whole spectacle is awesome, and I think it looks amazing as well. When we are done, V shows up and killsteals us, which I thought was pretty rude, but Nero doesn't seem to mind. They decide to press forward and figure out if Dante is still alive. Along the way, V encourages us to destroy Qliphothr roots, which are bursting through the earth and sucking the blood out of innocent people. This part never really seems to play a large role in the story, and serves mostly to give you some more missions to complete, but fighting demons is fun, so we press forward. We should also note that Nero and V don't seem to know each other very well, and this is confirmed when Nico shows up and introduces herself to V for the first time. There is a good interaction between V's Griffin and Nico that expands more on their backstory and character. I found myself looking forward to the story bits that I would get at the end of each mission at this point because they were all pretty good. I think it's a pretty major compliment to consider these moments a reward to the player for completing the mission, because the truth is, not all games turn out this way. Nero and V decide to split up and meet at the bottom of the Qliphothr route. This next mission and story thread I found to be a bit more boring than the rest of the game. I think the game did a great job in the beginning, setting up some awesome characters with interesting backstories, and then sent them on a bit of a mundane video game quest to destroy Qliphothr roots. It's a bit weird to say it this way, but I never really got attached to the idea of saving the world or rescuing innocent civilians in this game. I care more about the main characters and how they develop. So even though the combat is fun and there were some good encounters, I felt like it didn't do much to drive the story and it hurts the pacing a bit. The boss had a pretty cool design though, and really got me familiar with Nero's grappling mechanic in combat. Once this boss is defeated, a lady named Lady pops out, naturally. It turns out she is a friend of Dante's and needs some time to recover. Of course, while this is all going on, V has his own path to the same location, and we get a chance to test out the summoning combat style and learn a little more about V as a character. This is his first appearance in DMC after all. I think V is a pretty decent character and definitely has his moments. I did have a hard time relating to him, especially in comparison to the other main characters. This is 100% just personal taste, and I can totally see how different people would really enjoy V and see him as their favorite character. He has a mysterious past. No one really knows much about him or his motivations. He gives off this gothic emo vibe with his love of poetry and speaking in riddles. He seems to care about humanity though, since he is the one forcing us to destroy these roots. Besides being a good testing ground for V's combat style, this mission is also pretty boring, but once again is saved by having an interesting boss fight with amusing dialogue. I almost killed this boss with a double S rating, and then got hit once just before I killed him. Good times. Just at the end, we get a look at a new character trait for V. Cowardice is not really the right word, but it's more like a realistic idea of his own power. We already heard him earlier saying that Nero is the only one who can defeat Urizen, so V doesn't think that highly of his own combat strength, which is interesting to note. Very different from Nero and Dante in that regard. He sees this gigantic demon chasing him down and runs, almost in fear, falling to a lower level that starts off the next mission. This mission is very boring and has pretty much no story elements at all until you get to the boss. There is a new enemy type or two introduced, but beyond that, it's just fighting your way to the end. When you reach the boss, V overhears a new demon lady with 3 heads named Malphus. She is very good at talking about sensitive information very loudly, so anyone can overhear her. V learns about the Devil Sword Sparta, which I have no idea if this is new to DMC 5 or if some of the previous games included it as well. Malphus seems to fear it for some reason, so of course we want to get our hands on it. We beat the crap out of her mounted henchman, and he barely escapes. V isn't strong enough to chase him down, and he knows he's not strong enough to wield the Devil's Sword Sparta. He thinks Nero is the perfect candidate, so sets off to locate both Nero and the sword. At this point, the game jumps back to Nero as him and Nico have Lady taken care of and are waiting for her to recover. We then see the same huge demon that chased V away, and not surprisingly, Nero jumps into action immediately. This boss plays out to be more like a puzzle than anything else, although it's very simple to figure out. You take out his legs and jump on his back and wail on him. Nothing too special, and maybe one of the weaker moments in the game. I see what they wanted to go for here with this huge spectacle boss fight, and visually it looks the part, but the fight itself falls a bit flat. By the time we're done, Lady has woken up, so maybe we can get some answers. We learn that she was captured, and she knows Trish was as well. Lady and Trish are the 2 girls that we saw briefly helping Dante fight Urizen at the very beginning. They just kind of disappeared from that scene, so I guess we learned that they were captured and are being held inside enemy bosses somehow. V shows up, and him and Nero head out in search of Trish and the Devil Sword Sparta. We get a bit more character development, and then it's back to more corridors and battle arenas. Once again, the combat and story are good enough to keep us pushing forward. We're traveling through some sort of subway station with seemingly endless levels to it, and it's not hard to get yourself turned around. Everything looks the same, and it can be tough to get your bearings. It's worth noting, though, that the combat encounters are starting to ramp up a bit, and they're a lot more engaging, with enemies that are more aggressive, keeping you on your toes so that the game doesn't stop being fun despite the blandness of the level design. We then get a boss fight featuring both Nero and V. I'm pretty sure my V was AI controlled, but I'm not 100% certain. It's kind of fun to combo up with him, but it makes the fight pretty trivial overall and not very memorable. I feel like this boss fight should have been a lot tougher to make it feel like we needed V's support, but maybe this is dealt with differently on higher difficulties. V then has a strange moment where all of a sudden he remembers being in this exact location before. He points at a house that Nero seems to know nothing about, but maybe V lived here as a child? V decides to take off to find the Devil Sword Sparta, and Nero goes in a different direction once again. It isn't even really clear where Nero is going. He ends up in a similar ruined city environment, but it gets more demonic the further we go in. We find these totally normal elevator-type devices that are ascending higher and higher. The place then starts to look more familiar, and it's possible you might clue in to where you're off to now. Another rematch against Urizen. I guess we don't need the Devil Sword Sparta or V's help after all. Surely there is no way this would once again be an unwinnable fight, would it? Well, this time you're actually able to break the shield, and we get a second phase. Urizen decides to actually stand up and fight you, and now it's an unwinnable fight. Well, the shield was taking a very small amount of damage. I don't know if it's actually possible to break it, but I definitely didn't do it. A cutscene starts, and once again we're saved by a demonic figure. We know who it is. It's Dante. The game then shows us a cutscene that flashes back to when the whole thing started. We see Morrison and Dante discussing a new job, and Morrison introduces V as the client for the job. He comes in all mysterious as usual, and says he has no name and is only 2 days old. Just kidding, we can call him V. He has a simple request, to stop a powerful demon from resurrecting. I think the main part of this scene is to finally give you a little bit of time with Dante's character. If you're new to this series, you get a feel for his personality here. After this cutscene, it is back to playing as V and searching for the Devil Sword Sparta. V seems to know exactly where to go and leads us through a relatively long and uninteresting mountain pass into an equally uninteresting ruined dungeon of some sort. We pop out the other side and lo and behold, the Devil Sword Sparta just randomly stuck in this incredibly random piece of wall. We have a pretty simple fight against some new enemies and destroy another Clyphop root. V then tries to wield the sword, but it's clearly too heavy for him. And then another coincidence. Dante is laying nearby unconscious. We have no idea how he got here or why he's here. Apparently the sword was concealing his presence somehow. It doesn't make much sense to me, but before you can think too much of it, V starts to act strangely and walks towards Dante with the sword. He says some weird shit about how Dante never should have existed, lifts up the sword with all his strength, and threatens to stab Dante with it. Dante's eyes open and we're taken to a flashback of a young Dante being hidden in a closet by his mother. She tells him to run if things get bad, and then leaves, looking for someone named Virgil. I had no idea who Virgil was, but I'm pretty sure every DMC fan knows who he is. He is Dante's brother, and is featured in earlier games pretty regularly. Fans of the series may have expected Virgil to be tied up in this somehow, but I had no idea. It seems like things didn't go well for Dante's mother, but then we're taken back to V, who was just totally kidding about threatening Dante's life. He figured it was the only way to wake him up, naturally. Dante seems fine and is ready to get back to hunting Urizen, but for some reason wants Nero kept out of it. V convinces Dante otherwise for now, reminding us again that he thinks Nero is the only one who can defeat Urizen. We then go back in time again, this time right before the beginning of the game. We get a chance to meet Trish and Lady a little more formally, and also notice that V is once again not excited to fight and actually backs out at the last minute. Maybe he is a coward. Anyway, this is a basic mission, but serves as a great chance to play Dante for the first time. Each fight introduces combat encounters we have seen before with different characters, but now we have to figure them out as Dante with his huge assortment of fighting styles. At this point, we haven't unlocked his optional weapons yet, but it's still fun to test things out and learn a new character. This is, however, the third time now that we're battling through a level in order to get to Urizen. And while I can see the reasons why the story keeps putting us through this, it doesn't mean that it won't start to feel a bit old after a while. At least this time the game doesn't put you through yet another full unwinnable fight. After a minute or two of battle, a cutscene kicks in and we get kicked in, and then Nero walks in. And this is where the game gets started. We get a bit more insight as to what happened to Dante after Nero left with V. We actually see Trish and Lady get captured, and Dante try one more time in Devil Trigger mode with the Devil Sword Sparta. He fails and is blasted out of the area, I guess explaining why we found him and the sword in such a random location. This is another place in the game where I feel like the pacing hurts the game's storytelling, but does make sense in terms of the gameplay Capcom was shooting for. See, we already know that Dante shows up to save Nero. We saw that a while back now, and have since done a few missions as V and now Dante. The next mission is all about reaching Nero and saving him, which technically could have been done in a short cutscene and moving the story along at a better pace. But because Dante is a new character, we need more missions and more battle rooms to put him through, so the game can be padded out with more Dante gameplay. To be honest, I'm not totally against this, and I think this is probably the best way they could have done it. It's true that we should get more Dante gameplay and get brought up to speed with how he works. They even introduce more new enemy types in these areas as well, so it's not like I hate it. But in terms of story pacing, it's hard to deny that bouncing around the timeline this often and already knowing the outcome of your mission beforehand can make the story feel like it's dragging a bit. Anyways, when we finish, we kill another basic boss and rescue Trish now. Dante leaves her with V, who seems to be struggling a bit more than normal. While Trish is resting, V decides to tell her his full story, and it's a doozy. So, my understanding of V's story is this. Dante's brother Virgil is wandering around like a madman and is unable to live with the idea that he has been defeated over and over again by Dante. He decides to go back to his home where the fire happened and their mother presumably died. He casts some sort of ritual and stabs himself with his katana, which results in our V just popping out of him. It seems that V is who Virgil would be if he had no devil inside him, and Urizen is who Virgil would be if he had no human in him. So V is the humane side of Virgil and wants to stop his demon half Urizen, but V is running out of time. His body is actually starting to disintegrate. He can manage for now, but not for much longer. Also worth noting, we can now make the connection that the person who took Nero's arm earlier in the game was actually Virgil before he transformed into Urizen.
You're a big boy.
Trish tells V to man up, and we jump back to Dante for yet another mission on his way to save Nero. This time we get to play around with his new motorcycle weapon, but my first impressions weren't great and I didn't use it very much. We solve some puzzles, slay some demons, and find ourselves back at Dante's home. Dante seems to discover the secret to Virgil somehow, but honestly this part confused me. He talks about being stabbed with this demonic dagger thing, and then just stabs himself with it for seemingly no reason. This then activates his super devil trigger, and now Dante is even more powerful and seems to have access to super speed flight. He uses this to rescue Nero, and finally it seems like the story is catching up to itself. We face off against Urizen for the 4th time, but now Dante is actually strong enough to damage him, and we have a pretty fun boss fight. Just as we're about to defeat him, however, the world begins shaking and falling apart. The Qliphoth is evolving or something, and Urizen decides to teleport out of here. Dante is pissed, and it's understandable because that means we have to fight Urizen at least one more time, resulting in a minimum of 5. So I don't care how good your game is, fighting the same boss 5 times is excessive. However, now that the crew is finally together, I have to admit that I was getting excited again because I knew we would finally be pushing the story forward. We get a pretty fantastic cutscene with Nico meeting Dante for the first time, and then the 3 head out in their own directions to locate Urizen. I think technically each character actually takes the same path, but you can choose who to play as. I chose Nero. The mission has you clearing demon rooms and dropping to lower sections. Eventually we get low enough to trigger a cutscene showing the 3 main characters meeting up, but then falling into a hole as the ground just opens up beneath them. The 3 characters are separated once again, and we start off with V, who feels like he is on his last legs. You can visually see his skin drying and falling apart. It doesn't take long for him to collapse. He wakes up in this dreamlike world, where he fights some previous bosses again to unlock the use of each familiar. This seems to rejuvenate him a little, and he presses forward. By the time he makes it to Malphas, V is just about fallen apart and is in no shape to fight her. This time, it's Nero who saves the day. We do play through a mission with Nero, but there's nothing of note that happens on the way in regards to the story. I had a pretty easy time with Malphas overall, just kiting her from far with Nero's Magnum. There's a bit of a touching moment where V is obviously just about in shambles, but he needs to get to Urizen, his other half, and actually needs Nero to basically carry him there. Nero does so, even though it means Dante will probably win the race to Urizen. Speaking of Dante, we play as him next, and he seems like the lucky one who landed in the perfect spot. He just keeps descending further and further, fighting battles along the way. The boss of this mission is actually one of my favorites. I really enjoy when games dip into mythological fantasy for enemy ideas, and Cerberus is one of my favorites. I found him to be pretty easy, but still fun to fight, and he looked fantastic. Once defeated, he allows Dante to use a new half-nunchuck, half-quarterstaff weapon that I think I would have had a lot of fun using if I spent more time with the game. With Dante getting close to Urizen, we get a short cutscene with V telling Nero the truth about Urizen, who is actually Virgil, Dante's brother. This is what I was alluding to much earlier in the video when I was wondering how DMC fans who would have played the previous game would perceive the story. I feel like most DMC fans probably saw through this whole facade and knew that Virgil would be in the game somewhere and that he was probably the final boss, as he seems to have been in previous games as well. Dante finally reaches Virgil in the front yard of their old home. Now there is a demonic tree with a weird fruit that Urizen wants to eat. He does the typical evil villain thing, talks about his desire for power and such, and then just eats the fruit. He transforms into a slightly different version of himself, with much more eyeballs. I found him to look a little bit silly, which is good I guess because we then get to slap him around, and this time it's for good. Kind of. As Dante delivers the finishing blows, we hear Nero pushing back against the idea that Nero and Virgil have to fight like this. He feels like since they are brothers, they should be able to set aside their differences and work together. He is about to learn more that will complicate matters even further, but first, V needs to finish off Urizen. This part feels a bit strange to me as well. It feels like V was an actual good person the whole game up to this point. He never did anything evil and actually seemed to care about the world. But now, in these last seconds, he acts like it was his plan all along to be reunited with Urizen and transform back into Virgil. He had to know Virgil would still have evil intentions, so I don't know why he was so eager to help him reach his goals. Maybe I'm just missing something. Anyways, we get to meet Virgil, who seems to be at full strength, and honestly, I really like this character. I think it was a bit of a disservice to the game to leave him out of it for so long. His voice actor was great, and I felt like I wanted more time with him, even after the game was done. It's possible he's an awesome character in previous games as well, I really don't know. When we see the three characters, Dante, Nero, and Virgil, all standing around together, you might start getting some ideas in your head, and rightly so, because seconds after Virgil leaves, Dante reveals the truth. Virgil is Nero's father. So let's get this straight. V was half of Virgil, so V was Dante's brother and Nero's father at the same time. Nero is Dante's nephew. Dante is Uncle Dante. Dante and Virgil have no problems fighting each other to the death, even though death never actually happens, and they seem destined to fight for eternity. Nero thinks this is all ridiculous. He's a bit flattened by the news at first, and this gives Dante a head start to chase down Virgil. Virgil is waiting on the top of the Clyphop, so now we have to ascend. I would say the only interesting thing that happens on the way to Virgil is a series of fights against V's old familiars. I don't think it made much sense that the familiars would want to fight Dante to the death, but it did make for a few fun fights, so I don't hate it that much. We then cut to a scene where Nico, Lady, Trish, and Dante are fleeing the scene as the environment is collapsing all around them. Nero is still coming to terms that Virgil is his father, getting increasingly upset. Everyone keeps trying to convince him that he can't kill his father. He would never get over it if he did. Nero decides to take matters into his own hands and jumps out of the van. The game then brings us back to Dante, and we have our face-off against Virgil. Once again, I love the tension between these two, and this is by far the most fun boss fight in the whole game. Virgil has a devil trigger just like Dante, so he puts up a pretty big fight. He actually killed me in my playthrough, and this was the first time I died all game. To be fair, I didn't really play that well against him, so I deserved my death. I just used a golden orb, which rezzed me on the spot at full health and full devil trigger. Overall, I don't like this mechanic very much, but I suppose if I really hated it, I didn't have to use it. It was convenient to help me get to the end of the game faster. After the golden orb, I played a bit better and defeated Virgil. At this point, we get my favorite cutscene in the game, but let me set it up a little bit better by describing what happens in Mission 20, the final mission. It starts off with Nero finding a payphone and using it to call Kyrie. He tells her he just found out he has a family and isn't sure how to handle it. Kyrie tells him that he shouldn't doubt himself and he always knows what's right. This fills him with determination. He thanks her and then promises her he is coming home after doing one last thing. Kyrie has zero actual screen time in the game, but because Nero is such a great character and obviously cares a lot about her, we see her as this perfect woman for Nero, and I was rooting for him to make it back to her. As he starts heading towards his uncle and brother, his true plan is revealed. I think the game did a pretty good job baiting me, and perhaps others, into believing that Nero actually wanted to kill Virgil. But this is the opposite of what he wants to do. He wants to stop the family infighting. He already thought it was stupid that Dante and Virgil would fight like this, since they were brothers. But now that he finds out he is related to them, he's had enough. In this moment, he realizes his true self and grows back his human arm and activates his devil trigger. He has the same blood inside him after all. He plunges into the battle at the perfect time and decides he is the one who will put a stop to this. Dante backs down after an epic bitch slap, and Virgil decides to take on Nero. So, if you've been keeping count, this is the second time we fight Virgil, but Virgil was also Urizen, and we fought him 5 times. So this is technically the 7th time we're fighting the same character, but who cares at this point? At least the final battle was set up expertly. I love the first time Nero pulls his trigger, flipping the bird in the process. This fight was just as epic as the fight with Dante, and he didn't kill me this time. It's here where the story takes a weird turn in my opinion. After Nero defeats Virgil, he convinces the other two that the world is falling apart and they need to help stop it. Dante agrees, which makes sense, but Virgil agreeing just seems odd. It's true that Nero just beat him, so I guess he should follow orders, but it seemed kind of weird that the main villain of the game, supposedly the whole reason the world is falling apart to begin with, decides that maybe he should help stop all this destruction. Why not just fight to the death and at least have a chance at destroying the world as well? Regardless, he has a change of heart. Now, him and Dante decide to take off and sever the Qliphoth roots on their own, which will result in them being stuck in the underworld together. They want Nero to stay behind because he is the only one they trust to keep the normal world safe. They double bitch slap Nero and say their goodbyes like a normal functioning family. Virgil tosses the V-book to Nero and says he won't lose in their next battle. I suppose that takes place in DMC 6. In expert fashion, the game ends with a final cutscene with Nero and Nico driving home together and bantering a little. Kyrie calls and Nero promises once again that he's almost home. It's a touching final scene and I really liked it. We then get an awesome transition into the credits with Devil Trigger playing in the background and Nero battling demons. I think it might be possible to get different reactions from Nico here, depending on how well you do, because she complained about my performance. We then get a cool battle with Dante and Virgil working together against an onslaught of demons. I didn't do too well here either, as Virgil was sure to let me know. And then, that's it. That's the full story and the full game. Overall, I enjoyed my time with the game very much. I felt like the game was padded with a few too many missions maybe, and the pacing was hurt by this, as well as the decision to tell the story from multiple timelines and perspectives. I think it worked well in the end and told a fun story. If there were less other games in the world for me to sink my teeth into, I could see myself devoting a lot more hours into actually mastering the combat system and beating the game on harder difficulties. Alas, I will be putting DMC 5 away for the time being and moving on to newer and older things. I hope I did the game justice for you guys. I've heard the DMC fanbase can be quite passionate about how people talk about their game, and I hope my feelings were clear. I will leave you with my favorite moments of the game, so if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. This was quite the project for me and it took me a lot longer than I wanted it to. Hopefully over time I can refine my skills and put things out a bit faster for you. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't for future videos. Once again, thank you very much. Hey there, Casey from the future. Just about finished editing this video and I realized there was some things I forgot to include in my script and also some updates that happened while I was working on this video. On December 15th, there was actually a DLC released that allows you to play through essentially the whole game as Virgil. So that's really cool. I was mentioning how awesome of a character Virgil is, and it's really cool that you can actually play with him in the game. I haven't tested him out. I have no idea how he feels. I'm pretty much done with DMC 5 right now, but for those of you interested, you can check that out. Also, I didn't really talk about some of the extra features in the game, like the Void or the Bloody Palace. These are just separate add-ons. Like the Bloody Palace gives you more excuses to fight different encounters, and the Void, I believe, is something to do with like taking photos of all the different demons and items you get in the game and stuff. It's pretty interesting and good for artistic value, but doesn't add a whole bunch to the game. Anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know about the Virgil DLC and some of the extra stuff that I didn't talk about in the game. Again, hope you enjoyed the video and get ready for my favorite moments.
Surrounding cities have ceased to function as a result of the mysterious tree that apparently attacked the city approximately 1 month ago. In light of this incident, the government... They're demons! I've seen them with my own eyes! Red Grave is completely taken over!
Let us pray for mercy. This is a trial from the heavens above.
Same crap, different day. So, tell me.
Tell you what,
How's it feel to be rescuing the guy that killed your father?
Hey, I'm glad we're getting personal. Well, he abandoned my mother and I and left us for dead. So I feel nothing.
Well, he's not exactly going up for Father of the Year award now, is he?
His research wasn't half bad. Came in handy. Mildly thankful for that.
They have to do that in here. It already smells like ass.
That's you.
Hey, Nico!
Don't lose your tits. I see him.
Hey, you have to hit every single bump in the road? Gonna ruin my groove.
What's happening? What's going on?
You look like you need a hug, but you're not gonna get one from me. Better get lost.
Hey, who are you? Hey, you're gonna get yourself killed!
Don't crap yourself. He likes to kill demon things. Let him do his thing.
You hear what I said, you dumb one-armed son of a bitch? You're gonna die!
Cheer up, crew cut. You taking notes? All right. Time to kick some ass.
real pro at smacking demons around. That's why I built him that well-functioning arm. To kick demon ass. Hey, Psycho! Watch the merchandise!
Hey, stop bitching and take cover. Somebody call a doctor?
I wasn't expecting any survivors!
Sorry to disappoint you. Hey, you happen to see a guy around here? About this big, uses a cane? I was supposed to meet him. Did you snack on him?
Your blood is a very precious sacrifice. Eating you would do me no good. I must have every last drop to rule the underworld as king.
King? You? I don't know. I mean, you're a big guy and all, but you seem more like a knuckle-scrapping fart in the wind than anything else. No offense.
Do you know who I am? I shall show you the wrath of the mighty Goliath!
Cool trick! Hey, do you do parties?
You'll be sorry for this!
Yeah, maybe I will. Sorry I'm about to kill you.
Insolent human! You're the one who's
Out of the way! Guess there's no point thinking about it. Perfect timing. Now we're starting to act like a team.
Ew. You like flirting with me? Knock it off. Get in the car. Oh my God.
All right, Missy, you're on.
Keep squawking, little chickie.
Yeah. See ya.
Impressive.
Yo, you just here to window shop? Whoa, you are the infamous Dante. I'm Nicoletta Goldstein. Sound familiar? My grandmother is Nell Goldstein, the gunsmith that made all your fancy weapons that you got strapped back there. Yeah, there she is.
You don't much look like her.
Yeah, I got my looks from my daddy. That's about all I got from him. But based on his research, I managed to cobble this. Consider it a gift in honor of us finally meeting. Meeting.
I'll take that.
Once, only kings of the underworld may enter these gates. You shall not pass!
Oh, easy there, fella. Hey, I remember a stinky little pooch just like you.
You insult me, foul-scented creature!
Looks like your master's got you on a pretty short leash. Come on, little puppy. I'll take you out for a walk. Come on, let's go.
You have fought our king in the past. I am king of the Cerberus tribe! They were weak, but we will feast on your flesh and gnaw on your bones!
So, you're the strongest in the litter. Looks like we're gonna need a bigger leash. Come.
Guess I'm the first one here. I like that.
They're brothers? Why are they fighting each other?
To see one's justice through, a man must fight for it, even if the one who stands before him is his kin.
That's ridiculous.
The brothers of blood disagree on the very reason of their existence. They must fight.
Dante!
You're late. Just finishing up.
Is that really your brother?
I'm afraid so.
So he was behind all this. Your own flesh and blood.
Right again.
In the last throes of defeat, I see.
V, get back. Things are about to get really messy.
No. Please. Let me. I want to end this battle with my own hands. Do not struggle, for if you can't even defeat me, then you've already lost.
I will not lose. Not to Dante. I need power. More power.
I know. We are one and the same, you and I. But you've lost me, and I've lost you. Yet we are connected by that one feeling. While thy branches mix with mine, and our roots together join.
What is this?
Virgil. Hey, Virgil. Your portal opening days are over. Give me the Amato.
If you want it, then you'll have to take it. But you already knew that.
I had a feeling you'd say that.
How many times have we fought?
Hard to say. It's the only memory I have of us since we were kids. Time to finish this, Virgil. Once and for all.
I won't lose to the likes of you, little brother. Such a fool. Foolish. It's rushing me behind all you can do. is my son.
Yeah, dumbass. You can't remember through that thick skull of yours?
Well, well. That was a long time ago.
I guess you were young once too. And as much as I'd love to hear that story, I think it's about time we
ended this.
Hello? Nero? Is that you, Nero? Did something happen?
Kyrie. When I was a kid, I was alone. You and Kratos were all I knew. And now all of a sudden I find out I have a family. What am I supposed to do with that?
You always know which path is right and which is wrong. There's no need to doubt yourself.
Thanks. I guess that's all I needed to hear. I have one last thing to take care of. Then I'm coming home. I couldn't protect Kratos. To this day, I hate myself for not having enough strength. But this time is different. I swear! I'm not letting you die!
This is curious.
Nero.
What form of power is this?
What the hell?
This ends right here.
Listen to me. I told you already. This is not your...
You listen, deadweight. I won't let you kill each other. There are other ways of settling your differences. I'm putting a stop to this sibling rivalry.
You came all this way just for that.
Virgil. V. Whatever you call yourself. Dante's not gonna die here. And neither are you. Do you have a problem with that?
Not gonna die my ass. Oh, that bitch slap nearly killed me.
If I beat Nero, then by default,
I beat you. Agreed, Dante?
Whatever. I don't really care. I'm just gonna sit this one out.
When this is over, I'll make you submit. Father.
This has nothing to do with you. Stand down.
Nothing to do with me? It has everything to do with me!
Nero.
Fuck you! Take me seriously now?
Hoo-wee! I'm still in freaking shock.
About what?
Duh. Your arm? Who the hell grows an arm back? It's just weird. It's like a lizard tail or something.
Look, I don't know, it just grew. I mean, are you kidding me? Lots of weird stuff happened. There were demons and scary plant roots and arms growing back. Lots of stuff.
Do you know how much love and care I put in that devil breaker?
Nope. This arm, it's nice.
So, how's it feel?
How's what feel?
Saving the man who killed your own father. Heard Dante killed Virgil once.
It doesn't matter. They're both gone now anyway.
It's okay to cry. If you want, Nero, over a loss.
Not crying.
It doesn't make you a crybaby. Does make you a little bitch, though.
There it is. You think I'm a demon?
I didn't cry when my asshole daddy died. But... yeah, I know. I wouldn't be here without him, that's a biological fact.
Right.
All I'm saying is, tough guy, it's okay to cry if you want.
I'm
Devils
not
cry.
crying.
Devils cry.
I'm not gonna
Kittens
cry.
cry.
Will you
Meow.
shut up? Will you
Puppies
stop
cry.
it? Look at you. You're
Why don't
nobody's
you cry on my
crying, all right?
shoulder?
Stop
Come
saying
on, cry on
cry.
my shoulder. I know you
You
wanna.
say cry again. Devil may cry. Fuck.
You said it.
Hey, kitty. Yeah, I'm coming home. Oh yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but I got a surprise for you.
Oh yeah, he's got a huge surprise.
You shut up! No, kitty, not you. Nico, you know, and her big mouth. What the hell's your problem? Where'd you learn to drive? Hey, sorry, I gotta call you later. It's time to get back to work. Got an arm. You're good.
It's a prototype, and this is the perfect place to test it out. Look, you're gonna use it, and it's
a work of art. Gotcha.
And it ain't complete without you.
Well, how sweet. Feels good.
You'll get fixed as soon as we get back.
So, Devil's Cry, huh? Let's hear what that sounds like! Come on! This makes it easier for me.
Guess that's the end then.